myself Pushpender Singh. We are going to start with our daily current affairs. So as you know that these lectures are basically useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination which is conducted by the UPSC. We are specifically referring the two national newspapers, the Indian Express as well as the Hindu. You can also refer these two national newspapers for your preparation. You can supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures. Alright, and you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures. So let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first is all about the heritage tree. Okay, so here the Maharashtra government have planned, or the cabinet of the Maharashtra government has decided to amend the Maharashtra Urban Areas Protection and the Preservation of the Trees Act 1975. So this Trees Act 1975, right, will be amended as decided by the Maharashtra cabinet or the government of Maharashtra. Okay, to provide some provisions related to the protection of the heritage trees. So here what is happening is that the trees are very useful not only for the aesthetic point of view but also for the livable conditions for the human habitation also. For example, they provide the oxygen, they provide fruits, they provide timber, they provide other services to the human beings. So here, to endorse the importance of these trees, to endorse the recognition of those trees which are given to the human society, to the humans, right, for their sustenance, are trees which are having approximately 50 years of the age, right? Such trees or greater than 50 years of the age will be defined as a heritage tree. For that purpose, a survey will be conducted in the state of Maharashtra, and such heritage tree which are having the age of 50 years and above will be protected. Okay, such trees with respect to the heritage tree will be uh, specified right from the time to time by the government of Maharashtra. So various species of the trees, right, which will be declared as a heritage tree, or such trees belongs to a particular species can be declared a heritage tree. Such species will be notified from the time to time by the government of Maharashtra. Okay, so here the cabinet of the Maharashtra government basically gave the green signal for the formation of the Maharashtra Tree Authority, right? This Maharashtra Tree Authority will also take care of, the protection regarding to the trees. So the most important aspect is the Maharashtra Tree Authority, which will also be set up for the purpose of the protection of the trees. Okay, it will have ultimate responsibility to protect and to conserve the trees, including the heritage trees. Okay, here, as you know that the last October in the year of 2020, right, the implementation of this act or the trees act, basically that was the responsibility at that point of the time to the urban development department, but that responsibility have been transferred to the environment and climate change department of the Maharashtra. Now this act, or this Maharashtra Urban Areas Protection and Preservation of the Trees Act, basically focus on increasing the tree cover in the urban areas, right? It also protect the existing trees along, some sort of preserving those having some sort of a cultural importance, right, which are also in the need of the hour, right? So it's a critical that development is carried out in a sustainable manner in the Maharashtra to ensure the conservation of the nature along with such development. Okay, so here the department, the department or environment department with consultation with the forest department would issue some sort of guidelines for the purpose of declaring such heritage tree in the state of Maharashtra. So here the most important aspect is they will also consider, right, the trees, the botanical, historical, religious, mythological and cultural importance of a particular tree before being defined as a heritage tree. Okay, now the heritage tree will also get some special protection. For example, if the heritage tree is, let's say, 50 years old, okay, that means if that heritage tree which is of 52 years of the age, and if this tree has to be felled or this tree has to be cut, okay, the party or the authority or the concerned person who is felling this tree will have to plant 52 number of trees, 52 number of trees, right, in a compensation. So that is in with the synonymous of the age of a particular heritage tree. If that age of particular age of heritage tree is basically felled, right, the number of or the age of that heritage tree, right, to that number, the number of such tree will be planted by such authority or by such concerned person, right? And that tree will also be having some sort of a height that is around 6 to 8 feet. Okay, that height of the trees of 52 numbers will be planted by the concerned person, and such plantation will be carried out, maybe in the same plot or maybe in some other plot, right? And also the special provision have been made that if the compensatory plantation is not possible anywhere, okay, the tree feller or the person who felled the tree would pay the compensation in terms of the economic valuation of the tree which is being felled. Okay, and here the most important aspect is that any proposal for the felling of the trees which are less than 5 years of the old, right, such trees will be referred to the civic bodies, and such trees, right, which are having, more than 200 trees over 5-year old, right, or more than that. Okay, such permissions will be given to the Maharashtra State Tree Authority, which is being recently been set up by amending this act. Okay, next, the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, that is also known as CHIME. So the news is that the scientists which are working with the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, right, have found out some sort of a radio burst or a fast radio burst, and they have also assembled the largest collection of such fast radio bursts in the basically in the telescope. So that is basically a telescope which is basically used for the purpose of the finding out this such fast radio burst. Such CHIME or the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, or the telescope, which is basically the interferometric radio telescope, is being located in the British Columbia in the Canada. Okay, now the CHIME telescope basically detect more than 500 mysterious fast radio bursts. More than 500, right? Such mysterious fast radio bursts have been detected over the first year of its operation. So what is this, or what are these fast radio bursts? So fast radio bursts are basically some sort of a, the oddly bright, flashes of the light. Okay, they are just simply the bright flashes of the light which are basically registered in some sort of a radio band of electromagnetic spectrum. So here, with the help of this interferometric radio telescope, okay, such oddly brightly flash of the light which will be detected, okay, here in a particular radio band of electromagnetic spectrum, right? And here they will be splashed for a few milliseconds, right, before being completely vanished, okay, without any trace. So to find out such bright flashes of the light that basically occurred and that basically, recorded in a radio, in a basically in a electromagnetic spectrum or in the radio band of electromagnetic spectrum, for that purpose, right, such CHIME experiment was basically launched. So in brief, you can say that these mysterious beacons that have been spotted in various, in the distinct part of the universe that we have all around, as well as to find in our own galaxy also, that is the Milky Galaxy, right? So here the origins which are unknown, from where this the fast radio burst, or from there is this oddly bright flashes of the light basically evolved, right? Their appearance also in unpredictable. Okay, so it was first discovered, right, in 2007, when the radio astronomers basically, caught, some sort of a sight of around 140 bursts in their telescope in 2007. That was the first time such burst was basically, find out. So that CHIME telescope basically is consisting of, the four antennas which are consisting of a cylindrical parabolic reflectors which are of the size of 100 cross 20 meters. So you can say that, here, the scientists which are working with the CHIME collaboration, right, definitely they are trying to expand, right, some sort of a understanding regarding this fast radio burst. So this CHIME comprises basically the four massive cylindrical radio antennas, okay, roughly the size and the shape of the snowboarding half pipes, okay, you can say that, and which are currently located in the Dominion Radio Astrophysical Laboratory, which are, or the observatory, which are located in the Canada, or specifically in the National Research Council of Canada. Okay, now the telescope which we are talking about, basically, receives, right, some sort of a waves, right? Okay, basically, and it will also assess those type of radio burst also in the universe. Okay, so this telescope receives radio signals each day from half of the sky as the earth rotates, right? Most of the radio astronomy is done by by some sort of a large dish of the focused light from the different part of the sky. So the chime basically, which is a motionless at the sky, focuses on the incoming signals using some sort of a powerful digital signaling processor. Okay, that can work throughout some sort of a huge amount of data, right? And with the help of that, some sort of a the burst have been recorded with the help of this digital signal processing that makes the chime to be able to reconstruct and to look thousands of the directions simultaneously for the purpose of finding out such radio burst. Okay, and this antenna also receives the radio waves from the hydrogen in the space in the frequency band of around 400 to 800 megahertz of the range. Okay, now this is what you have basically, the four massive cylindrical radio antennas. So you can see here the one cylindrical radio antenna, this second is this, third is this, and fourth is this. You can understand is that how big they are. They are just a cylindrical radio antennas. Okay, that is basically also in the form of some sort of a having some sort of a parabolic shapes, right? The parabolic shape, which is basically used to find out the radio burst, right, in the universe. All right. Next, New Atlantic Charter. So here, the Prime Minister of the Britain, right, the Boris Johnson, or the UK Boris Johnson, as well as the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, right, on their meeting on the 10th of June 2021, have decided to have a new Atlantic Charter, right, which is an agreement, right, that was signed between the United Kingdom Prime Minister as well as the USA President Joe Biden. So this new Atlantic Charter would be signed or would have been signed between the two leaders of the two nations of the UK as well as the USA, right? This type of agreement or this Atlantic Charter agreement was signed at the first time, right, when the meetings was held, right, during the 2021 G7 summit that was happened in the Cornwall in the England. So this agreement was first signed, right, as a charter or the Atlantic Charter that was signed at that point of the time when the Prime Minister of the Britain, the as well as the USA President at that point of the time in 1941, right, between the Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of the Britain, and the Franklin D. Roosevelt, that was basically the President of the USA. Such charter or such Atlantic Charter was basically signed between these two leaders. Now, what is this Atlantic Charter? Why we are considering, or why these two leaders are basically considering this Atlantic Charter, and why they are signing this renewed or new Atlantic Charter, which was previously signed between Winston Churchill as well as the Franklin D. Roosevelt, right? So here, the first meeting that was occurred as at the Caribbean Bay. The Caribbean Bay is basically located in the United Kingdom. Okay, so here the seaside resort at the Caribbean Bay, when both of these leaders, right, the Joe Biden and the Boris Johnson, who were basically assembled together for the purpose of a meeting. Okay, this declaration was signed between the two leaders. Okay, now this Atlantic Charter basically set out some sort of a common goals for the world, after World War II, when the Franklin D. Roosevelt and the Winston Churchill basically signed this agreement. So these goals expanded, right, even after 2021. So you could understand that in 1941, when the world was coming out of World War II, right, the Atlantic Charter basically governed, right, the goals for the world after World War II, right, that was occurred, right. Now here these goals included some sort of a the freer trade, okay, across the world, disarmament, okay, then right to self determination, right, of all the people. So like that, a different aspects were included in the Atlantic Charter, right, and it is often cited as a cornerstone of the transatlantic special relationship between the nations, specifically between the UK and the USA in that respect. So you could understand here, in the Caribbean Bay, right, which is having the seaside resort, when the both of these leaders, the Boris Johnson, who is the Prime Minister of UK, and the Joe Biden, who is currently the President of the United States of America, is discussing upon the new Atlantic Charter. Okay. Next, the discovered small field bid round 3. So this discovered small field, that is DSF, was basically launched, right, initially in 2015, right, for the purpose of the discovering of the small fields, right, for the exploration of the crude oil and the gas, right, from across the country. So here the discovered small field bid round third was basically, announced or was basically launched by the Union Minister of Petroleum, Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan, right, for the purpose of discovering or for the purpose of bidding of these small field, right. So here I told you that the discovered small field policy was launched by the government of India in 2015 for the purpose of awarding, right, the acreage and the monetizing of some sort of a unmonetized discoveries, because our country is 80% of the crude is basically, is basically imported from the other countries. Even the natural gas is also imported from other countries. So we are heavily dependent on the natural gas and the crude oil for our, domestic need, for the purpose some sort of a unmonetized discoveries and some sort of a, undiscovered blocks will be basically, bidded out or will be auctioned for the purpose of further exploration purpose. So here the most important aspect is that, this DSF or this policy that we are talking about, the discovered small field policy, basically, which was implemented by the government of India, have lot of features like the revenue sharing contract model. What is that? A simple and easy to administer a contractual model, right, in the line of the government effort to promote the ease of doing business. So here the revenue will be shared, right? Who will explore these basically, these areas where the potential, the crude oil sources are there, with sharing with those revenue to the governmental agencies, right. Definitely you will have the low regulatory burden, and as well as you will have, no minimal biddable work program, no prior technical qualifications required. The other important aspect of this policy that we are talking about, the discovered small field bid round third, okay, here the most important is basically the revenue sharing, contract that would be given to the successful bidder. Then up to 100% FDI participation is possible. 100%, right. Here by the foreign companies at the joint venture, they can have up to 100% FDI. Okay. Then you will have the single license for the conventional and unconventional hydrocarbons, right, for the purpose of their exploration, extracting all type of hydrocarbons resources will be allowed, right, through this single license. No restrictions on the exploration activity, okay, during the contract period, right. Here the most important is that the contractor will be allowed to carry out the exploration during the entire contract duration. Next, the crude oil and, the gas pricing and sale related aspect. Here the freedom to sell this crude oil exclusively to the domestic market. For the gas pricing, contractor will be able to have this freedom for the pricing of the gas which is being produced by the, a particular contractor. Then it is open to all. That means to incentivize the new investors, a technical capability is not capped as a pre-qualification criteria. So that is, some sort of a no prior technical qualification is required for that purpose. Okay. And here the most important is the biddable government share of the revenue, right, that is net of the royalty, shall be payable only after the onset of production. So once your production is started, okay, you will have to pay the revenue to the basically authority. Okay. Here there will be no oil sales will be applicable on the crude oil production for that purpose. In the round first in 2016, 134 bids were basically submitted for 34 contact areas by the 47 companies, right. And that at that point of the time, 30 revenue sharing contracts was basically signed. in the round 2, right, in the year of 2018, 145 bids were basically submitted for the 24 contact areas, and 24 revenue sharing contracts were basically signed, right. It was successful, and now the government has decided to extend this, this model to further to the third round for that purpose. Okay, next you have the All India Survey on the Higher Education 2019 and 20. So here the Union, Education Ministry basically released the report of the All India Survey of the Higher Education 2019 and 20. So here this report is basically released by the MHRD, or Union Human Resource Development Ministry, right, which basically releases this report, right. And this MHRD basically collect this online information of, of the universities, colleges and other higher education institutions under this All India Survey of Higher Education. So here the most important aspect is that the Ministry of, the Human Resource Development basically collect this online information related to the university and the colleges. So this data was collected with respect to 2019 and 20. It has been found through this survey that there are around 1043 universities in our country, that is around 2% of the total higher education institutions, right. It will also consisting of around 42,343 colleges, that is consisting of around 77% of the higher education institutions, and also it consisting of around 11,779 standalone institutions, that consisting of around 21, right, which have been recently listed on the All India, Survey of Higher Education portal, right, which is also having 307 universities, where some sort of affiliated colleges are also there associated with those universities. The top states, right, where the highest number of colleges are located in our country, right, which are the Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. Okay. Next, for the purpose of urban district, the Bangalore basically tops in terms of the number of colleges. So Bangalore has the highest number of colleges, that is 1009 colleges, which is followed by the Jaipur, which is the capital of Rajasthan, which is having around 606 colleges. Okay. Cumulatively, total 50 districts in our country have around 32% of the colleges in our country. Now, to college density was also compiled by this All India survey, right. Here the college density you could understand is that the number of colleges per, the age group of the population, which is basically the 18 to 23 years of the age, right. So college density for the All India level, right, All India average is around 30. So that means we have 30 number of colleges per lakh, population, which is in the age bracket of 18 to 23 age of years age, or in the age bracket, right. This college density for the All India average is 30, right, which is varying from the 7, which is the lowest in the Bihar, to 59 in the Karnataka. So Karnataka having the highest number of college density, right. The Bihar is having the lowest number of college density in our country. Total enrollment in the higher education have been estimated to 38.5 million, right. Here the most important aspect is total enrollment, means the total admissions which have been occurred at the higher education level, at the college level, at the university level, right, which is combinedly for the girls and the boys is around 38.5 million, right. In that, around 19.6 million basically consisting of the boys and 18.9 million consisting of the female. So here the female constitute around 49% of the total enrollment. That is a positive sign that at least the female consisting of almost 50% of the total enrollment in our country. The Uttar Pradesh, when you talk about the highest student enrollment, the highest student enrollment was found in Uttar Pradesh. That is being followed by the Maharashtra and followed by Tamil Nadu. Next is gross enrollment ratio. What is gross enrollment ratio? See, the gross enrollment ratio you can understand is that, the percentage of the students, right, which is, the you can say that dividing the number of students enrolled in a given level of education, okay, regardless of any age, right, by the population of the particular age group. That age group we are considering about 18 to 13 years of the age. You could multiply it by, by 100. So you could say that the dividing the number of students enrolled in a given level of education, regardless of the age, by the population of that particular age group of 18 to 23, right, you could multiply it by the 100. You could find out the gross enrollment ratio. So the gross enrollment ratio at the higher education is around 27.1 percentage, that was basically recorded. Okay, if you see in this 27.1 percentage was basically recorded in 2019-20, it is, slightly increased from 2018-19, that was 26.3 percentage. It is also very low in 2014-15, that was only 24.3 percentage. So what you could understand is that the higher gross enrollment ratio, right, indicates the high degree of the participation. Okay, where the gross enrollment ratio, which is approaching, or exceeding 100%, you could say that it indicates the country is having, able to accommodate all of its school aging population, specifically in the colleges and the universities, right? If you consider the number of, the foreign students which are studying in our colleges, in our universities, right, the predominantly the foreign national consisting of the Nepal, around 28% of the total foreign nationals or total foreign students which are studying in India. That is closely followed by the Afghanistan, around 9.1 percentage. Then it is followed by Bangladesh, around 4.6 percentage, Bhutan consisting of 3.8 percentage, and the Sudan 3.6 percentage. Then the pupil teacher ratio. What is the pupil teacher ratio? Right, pupil means the student, right? Very, very simple. Pupil means student, the teacher means you have the teacher. So here the pupil teacher ratio is basically calculated by dividing the number of pupils on the schools or in the colleges, okay, roll by the full time equivalent number of qualified teachers. So you could understand that in the college level, right, you just calculate by dividing the number of pupils on the school roll by, by full time equivalent number of qualified teachers which are there at the university level and the college level. So when you say that at the university level, the college level, that is around 28, right, if regular mode is considered, right, for the purpose of, for the purpose of, its constituent, and for the universities it is just 18 for the regular mode. Then you have the gender parity index. What is gender parity index? See, gender parity index you could calculate in the primary education, secondary education, tertiary education, higher education, wherever you want. What is that? It is just simply the ratio of, right, the ratio of the female students, okay, enrolled at any level. You could understand at the primary level, secondary level, tertiary level, higher education level. So just ratio of the female students enrolled at any level, that you are calculating this gender parity index, okay, right, divided by the number of the male students at a particular level, that is enrollment, right, that we are talking. So that basically reflect, the equitable participation of the girls, how many girls are basically enrolled in a particular level. So here the gender parity index at the higher education basically in 2019-20, that was found 1.01. That means, it is higher than in 2018-19. That means you have more girls in the higher education than the boys specifically, right, which is a positive indication that the education for the females, right, specifically have been, resulted the fruits. So here if you have the gender parity index, for example, 1 indicate the parity between the sexes, right, between the male and the female, right. So gender parity index basically varies between 0 to 1. So 1 typically means the disparity, right. So if there is more than 1, right, you can say that it is disparity in favor of females, disparity in favor of females. For example, in 2019-20 you have 1.01, in 2018-19 it was 1. I just give you for information 2018-19 data for primary education. For primary education in 2018-19 it was 1.03. So you could understand that more females are there as an enrolled student in the primary education. In the secondary education it was 1.12, even higher. In the right, it is upper primary, sorry, it is in the upper primary education. In the secondary education it was 1.04. In the higher education, in the higher secondary education, right, that is basically your 12th level, that is also found 1.04. So you can understand that the females, right, the India is having the, the gender parity index indicate the number of girls which is more than the number of boys at all level of school education, that we have seen the primary education, upper primary education, secondary education, even higher secondary education, even the higher education, that in the college and university level is also higher. Okay, next, railway safety, right, for the purpose of the seamless, connectivity between the trains, as well as for the purpose of the safety of the railways, right? For the purpose of various other, connectivity, a proposal was basically approved by the Union Cabinet for the purpose of allotment of, around 5 megahertz of the spectrum in the 700 megahertz frequency band that will be dedicatedly used by the Indian Railways for the purpose of the public safety and the security services at the stations and the train level. So here, that spectrum, that is 5 megahertz spectrum in the 700 megahertz frequency, that will be used dedicatedly by the Indian Railways to provide the LTE based mobile train radio communication system on the route of the trains, right? So here the long term evaluation refers to, some sort of a standard for the smooth and efficient transition, towards more advanced, the technology to increase some sort of a capacity and the speed of the wireless data network. So here this long term evaluation data network will be connected, will be provided the mobile train radio communications to the Indian Railways, right? It will have the total investment of around 25,000 crore rupees, and this project will be completed in the next 5 years for that purpose. And the most important aspect is that this LTE, the long-term evaluation or the dedicated band of, the spectrum would be providing, the secure and the reliable voice, the video and the data communications, right, for the operations, for the safety, and for the purpose of the security of Indian Railways. So it will also be used in the form of the modern signaling, the train protection systems, right, and that will also, the seamlessly connect, right, the loco pilots and the guards while through the operations of the trains. Okay, and it will also enable the internet of the things, right, for the purpose of the remote asset monitoring, especially, the coaches, wagons, the locos, right, the CCTV camera. So what is that internet of the things? So you can say that the internet of the things refers to, some sort of the network of connected objects, okay, that are able to collect the exchange, able to collect the data, exchanging the data in the real time, right, by the uses of the sensors, by the uses of software, by the uses of technology. So here all such, the networks will be connected. So here the coaches, wagons, locos, right, live videos, right, these are all basically, some sort of a the capturing device will be there that will be connected, and real time information will be provided, real time information will be provided. So at the exchanging of the data, connecting of this data, right, with other devices and the systems on based on the internet will be provided based on this internet of the things. All right, next, the climate change and the human health. So here the most important aspect is Dr. Harshvardhan, who is basically the Union Home Minister for the Health and the Family Welfare, recently addressed the meeting of the World Health Organization High Level Coalition on the Health and Energy Platform of the Action. Okay, so let us understand what is that the World Health Organization High Level Coalition on the Health and Energy Level, energy platform of the action. So most important aspect is that it is a part of the World Health Organization. So high level coalition on the health and energy convened by the WHO, right? Here it is comprising of the leaders from various governments, right, including, let's say, the health ministers from across the countries, right? Here our honorable the Union Minister for the Health, Dr. Harshvardhan, also participated, right? So here it will also include the leaders from selected international organizations, other high level health and energy champions also will be participating, other experts also will be participating. So this objective of this high level coalition is to strengthen, some sort of the high level cooperation between the health and the energy sectors, right, increasing some sort of a political momentum, increasing or enhancing the investment, mobilizing the public support, right, as well as to find out some sort of, the practical solutions for the purpose of the climate oriented, human health, right. So here the expert body for that purpose, right, was set up, right, that is called the National Action Plan on the Climate Change, was set up by the government of India, right, and for the purpose of various objective to create the awareness among the general population related to, right, the impact of the climate change on the human health, right. That will also provide some sort of a policy measures to the healthcare providers, to the policy makers for that purpose. Okay, so here the national expert group submitted its report, right, recently in April 2021, right, which basically, recommended to include the subject specific health action plans on identified some sort of the climate sensitive diseases on the One Health platform. Okay, so here the most important recommendation is the green and the climate resilience healthcare facilities. What is that climate resilience healthcare facilities? The India is also, the signatory of the Mali Declaration, which is also related to the resilient healthcare facilities and climatic resilient healthcare facilities. Okay. Now, the most important thing is that our climate is changing very fast. The health systems, the healthcare facilities comes under, the mounting pressure or the severe pressure, right? It's making it very, very harder for the public health officials to keep people's health healthy, specifically, during this severe climatic impacts. So here, the WHO provided some sort of a guidelines for the climate resilience and environmentally sustainable healthcare facilities, right? That provide some sort of a healthcare professionals, healthcare facility managers with some sort of a tools and interventions to strengthen, the healthcare facility in the context of the climatic change. Okay, so the aim is to enable the healthcare facilities to anticipate some sort of a, to respond to recover, to adapt to the climate change shocks, to the stress, and to minimize some sort of a negative impact on the environment, and to leverage some sort of opportunities, right, with respect to those climatic change. So definitely ensuring some sort of a, the access to the essential services in the healthcare facilities is the prime most important, right? As well as the renewable energy, water, sanitation, hygienic measures will also be taken under this climate resilience healthcare facilities would also definitely improve, right, this climatic resilience and bring, some sort of a financial return to the world also with respect to that. Okay, next you have the temple, that is a famous temple in the basically Karnataka, that is Nanjundeshwara temple, right? So here this Nanjundeshwara temple is basically located in the Karnataka. So here recently what happens is, right, the son of the chief minister of Karnataka, right, the B.Y. Vijendra, right, who is the son of the chief minister of the Karnataka, V.S. Yedurappa, okay, recently have flouted or violated the COVID norms, right? As the temples across the country, right, across the states, is basically not open, or they are not open for the public for for the worshipping purpose. Now, this person or the son of the chief minister B.S. Yadurappa, right, Mr. B by Vijendra have flouted, have violated the norms of the COVID-19, right? He was especially allowed to enter into the temple, that is Nanjudeshwara temple. He performed the puja inside the temple, and recently various public interest litigation have been filed with the Karnataka High Court, right, slamming on the move of the B.S. Vijendra of flouting and violating this COVID-19 rules. And here the court observed that it is not right to apply different yardsticks for the politicians and the member of the public, right? And it conveys, some sort of a the wrong messages to the society. So you could understand that the court also observed that by allowing, the B.Y. Vijendra to perform the puja is tantamount to the violation of the COVID-19, the guidelines. Therefore, the court is also ordered the primary investigation report, right, that will be submitted by the Mysore Deputy Commissioner, right, that will be filed, right, before the competent court or before the High Court for that purpose. So here, the Nanjudeshwara temple is basically also called, Sri Kanteshwara temple, which is basically currently located in the Karnataka. So here, it is the ancient Hindu pilgrimage town, right? It is also known as the Najangudu, right? And it is dedicated to the Lord Shiva, right? It is also known as the Najungdeshwara temple. Now, the Nanju in the Kannada language, that means poison. That means the Lord Shiva which have drunk the poison, or the god which had drunk the poison. The poison is basically in the Kannada language, that is known as Nanju. So that the name of that basically the place or the temple basically named after that. Okay, and it is basically, the if you have seen, the various, the serials or the movies in the basically in the television, you would have seen that the great churning of the ocean of the milk, where this poison would have come out and Lord Shiva basically drank this poison. So here the name basically gave to that particular aspect. Okay, so here the temple, that is also known as the Nanjundeshwara temple, where the son of the chief minister of the B.S. Yadurappa has entered and performed the puja and flouted the COVID-19 norms for that purpose. Okay. Next, you have the Dinko Singh, right? So here, the Dinko Singh, who was also the famous boxer, recently died because of the liver cancer. The PM Narendra Modi have condoled the demise of the boxer Sri Dinko Singh. The Dinko Singh basically full name was the Nagom Dinko Singh, who was basically hailed from the Manipur, the northeastern state. Okay, and he was one of the most outstanding boxer in our country. Okay, he won right 1997 the King's Cup in the Bangkok. Right, this King Cup tournament is basically was basically the annual tournament or annual event that was basically performed on the honor of the birthday of the Bhumi Bol Adulya Dej, right, who is basically the king of the Thailand. So it is basically held in the Bangkok, right, and basically in the facing of the king's palace over there, right. The Dinko Singh was also won, right, 1998 the Asian Games in the Bangkok, right, and also bringing the first boxing gold medal in the 16 years to the India. So this Asian Games that we are talking is also known as the Continental Multi-Sport event, right, that happened or that held, right, every 4 years. That means once in every 4 years the Asian Games is basically is basically performed, right. So they have been organized by the Olympic Council of Asia, right, which is also recognized the most important by the International Olympic Committee, and described as the second largest multi-sport event after the Olympic Games. He also represented India in 2000 Summer Olympics. The Summer Olympics also is also known as the Games of Olympiad, which is also the major international multi-sport event that is also occurred once in a 4 years. Okay, and he was also awarded the Arjuna Award in 1998. Right, the Arjuna Award basically is officially, right, for the outstanding performance in the sports and then the games. Okay, is a sports honor of the Republic of India. That means it is awarded by the government of India. It's a sports and the games honor, right, to provide it to the outstanding performance in the sports and the games. He was also awarded the Padam Shri in 2013. He was legendary, the boxer. He has won lot of the basically medals. He has taken the name of the India to the Olympic level, to the Asian Games, to the basically to the Kings, the cup specifically in the boxing championship. All right, and he was also the serving personnel of the Indian Army, and he also coached the Navy team, right, to have the victory specifically in 2009, the inter services meet, right, and also he groomed various top boxers in our country. For example, the Olympian Antresh Lakra was basically groomed by the Dinko Singh. Then Commonwealth Games champion, right, the Surunjay Singh was also groomed by the Dinko Singh. So he was very legendary boxer who also coached, right, various the legendary boxers in our country. Okay, so he was the Dinko Singh who was recently died because of the liver cancer. Okay. Next, you have the Buddha Dev Das Gupta. The Buddha Dev Das Gupta was recently died at the age of 77. Right? He was basically born in 1944. Right? He was basically the Bengali poet, also the filmmaker. Right? And he was most famously known for the films like the Bagh Bahadur, Tahedar Katha, the Charachar and Uttara, right, which was the most famous Bengali films, right, which was, right, having associated with the Buddha Dev Das Gupta. And five of his film also won the National Film Award for the best feature film, and he won, right, the best direction, right, award at the National Film Award Festival twice as a director. Okay, and over the year, right, he also published the several works of the poetry, right, that include the Gover Li, the Coffin Kimba Suitcase, the Himjong, the Chatta Kaini. So these are all works of the poetry that was basically published by the Buddha Dev Das Gupta or written by the Buddha Dev Das Gupta, right. The Das Gupta also brought the Indian cinema back to the international stage after the Satyajit Ray, who died basically in 1992, right. So he basically take the Indian cinema to the international level, and he is also remembered, right, to one among the great the contributors to the Indian cinema, and he was proud Bengali, right, and he was also the legendary among the Ritvik Ghatak as well as the Mineral Saint. So he was the legendary the Bengali poet as well as the filmmaker who recently died in West Bengal. All right. So he was the Buddhadev Dasgupta. That's all for today. Thank you very much. We'll meet again tomorrow. Please be safe. Be at your home. Thank you very much.